Well, good afternoon. How is everyone? Good, good. And I'm feeling good as well, because if this was a Conservative Party conference, I'm telling you, the Welsh and Scottish slots, this hall would be half empty, perhaps not even that. So that shows that we are a truly United Kingdom party. And I can tell Laura, and what a fantastic speech that was, by the way, if she thinks things are bad in Wales. Just saying, just saying. So it is good to be here speaking with you. It's just over a week since I left the Scottish Conservatives, which is why there wasn't a video of me. I'm quite relieved about that. We didn't have time to do one. That's a good thing. I have to say the response to me from my former party leaving was abuse. But that just shows that they're rattled. They feel threatened, and so they should. They didn't stop the boats, and they haven't rolled back on net zero. Now, we have a real chance of making a breakthrough in Wales and in Scotland, and the impact of that will be felt throughout the UK. Now, despite my demeanour, I try to be a positive guy. I might not look it some of the time, and I do think defecting is a terrible word. It sounds negative, treacherous almost, but I've seen my move as a positive. I haven't so much defected, I've just switched sides. And do you know what? I've gone to the only party that is on the up in Scotland. The polls show it. Reform is the only party that is increasing its share of the vote. And why is that? Because Reform represents millions of people who feel ignored by the establishment and the other political parties. The voters who turned out in droves to support our excellent candidate Ross Lambie in the Hamilton by-election did so because they're fed up. Now, Ross, are you here? Stand up, Ross. There he is. That just shows what we can do in Scotland. The voters in Scotland see public services creaking at the seams under the SNP, and they want change. They see a Labour government that is making things worse for the very people they purport to represent. And we are attracting support from all over. We are the real People's Party. Now, I represented the Scottish Conservatives for 10 years as a councillor, and since 2016 as an MSP. It's been a privilege and an honour, and just as it's a privilege and an honour to now represent Reform. Next year's election presents us with a huge opportunity to shake things up in Scotland and Wales. Let me tell you a bit about Scotland. I was born there in Aberdeen. Scotland is a great place to live, but things are going wrong, and unfortunately, the normal rules of politics don't apply in Scotland. Usually, if a government fails, they get voted out. Not so in Scotland, where the SNP will have been in power next year for 19 years and have created a culture of failure which is accepted. But it's not acceptable, and we must fight to change it. It's not acceptable that we have record NHS waiting times. A&E performance hit historic lows with only 61.2% of patients seen within the 12-week outpatient target as of March this year. Over 5,000 patients waited for more than 2 years for treatment. 2 years, can you imagine that? In some hospitals, patients wait over 12 hours to be seen, staff shortages are chronic, morale is low, and the maintenance backlog has ballooned to over £1 billion. It is not acceptable that so many people struggle to get a GP appointment, but it's not surprising as the estimated number of whole-time equivalent GPs has fallen. Proposals to support GPs with more nurses and other specialists have moved more slowly than planned, and people report finding it more difficult to access care. Promises of an app, which is available to some patients in England, have not materialised because, of course, the SNP think they can make a better app. They just haven't got around to it, and it won't be better. Cancer treatment times have been missed year after year. The 62-day standard for beginning treatment after diagnosis is routinely breached. In a country with world-class medical talent, this is a failure of leadership. It's no wonder that health is the #1 concern for people. It's also not acceptable that we have a mental health crisis for young people, with thousands on the waiting list for treatment. Behind every statistic is a story of suffering, of lives put on hold, of families left in limbo. It's not acceptable that the poverty-related attainment gap in education has widened, despite closing it being Nicola Sturgeon's guiding mission. That probably explains it. Scotland once prided itself on a world-class education system. Today, international rankings show a steady fall in literacy and numeracy. Teachers are overworked, under-resourced, and increasingly disillusioned. The rhetoric is progressive from the SNP, the outcomes are regressive. Nor is it acceptable that we still have the worst drug death rate in Europe and have had for 7 years in a row. Deaths last year hit an astonishing 1,017. Imagine that, it's appalling. And it's not acceptable that our SNP-run ferry service, the equivalent of buses for islanders, is in such a mess, with 2 ferries being built at the SNP-run yard, years late, massively over budget, and with only one of them delivered, and the future of the yard uncertain at best. The duty of any government is to make life better for its people, especially the worst off. Now, I've tried not to hit you with too many statistics, because statistics are not much help if you're one of the 10,360 children in Scotland who are living in temporary accommodation. That's the highest number on record, and it reflects a 149% increase since 2014. A couple of more stats there, but they're important. Let me talk to you about that for a minute, because we have a nationally declared housing emergency in Scotland. A report titled "In Their Own Words" captured the lived experiences of these children, and it revealed unsafe environments, with children reported witnessing violence, including stabbings near their temporary homes, health impacts where poor conditions led to hospitalisation, and severe weight loss in vulnerable children, and educational disruption with long commutes to school and noisy living spaces causing exhaustion and poor school performance. Shelter Scotland described the situation as a national shame, arguing that temporary accommodation should be a stepping stone out of crisis, not a new crisis in itself. This week, the Housing Secretary's response to the housing emergency was, thankfully, to agree with me on bringing in AWAB's law in Scotland to tackle damp and mould in rented homes, and also agree with me on what should be exempt from ruinous SNP rent controls. What about crime? The most recent stats available show overall crime is up on the year before. The number of rapes and attempted rapes in Scotland rose by 15% last year. Since 2021, the number of attack reports has increased by 21%. The total number of sexual offences grew by 5% in the most recent year. Domestic abuse reports were up 26%, and shoplifting up 17%. Police are overstretched, cop shops are crumbling. It's a thin blue line in Scotland. I hope I haven't depressed you too much, because you know, I do often get accused of looking glum, but most of you can cheer up, because for all this progress under the SNP, We, not you, get to pay the highest taxes in the UK. Brilliant, isn't it? Now, Scotland needs a recovery government, and we have a duty to make sure it happens by getting the SNP out. The Scottish Government isn't responsible for everything in Scotland, but it's responsible for a lot. All the things that I've mentioned, like health, education, transport, housing, and I forgot to mention hollowed out local government, all come under its remit. And in all these areas, the SNP has failed. We're at a pivotal point, not just for the UK, but for Scotland. So we need that recovery government, and we need next year's elections to be about repairing our public services. We're already brimming with ideas on how to improve life for Scots. And if you'll just indulge me, I can give you some. On health, expand hospital at home, delivering hospital-level care in patients' homes, reducing pressure on acute wards. Get that app up and running so people can manage appointments, access records, and find local services. How about investing in prevention? That might be a good idea. Pool resources from public health, education, and local councils. Fund community-based screening, lifestyle coaching, and school health programs so that people don't end up at the doctor in the first place. In education, why don't we have a national learner profile system? Because traditional qualifications, important as they are, often ignore achievements outside the classroom. People could have a lifelong record of academic, vocational, and personal development, include volunteering, creative work, and leadership roles. Secondly, we often talk about empowering schools, so why not allow them to co-design some of their curriculum with local authorities, communities, and employers? That could include Gaelic medium education, regional history, or industry-linked modules. Transport's a passion of mine. It often doesn't work as well as it should. So why not create a national integrated transport card? Scotland's fragmented ticketing across rail, bus, and ferry networks creates barriers to seamless travel. So why not have a single smart card or app usable across all public transport models? Include discounts for low-income users and young people. These are just ideas, but ideas are where you start. The only way that Scotland can move on is by getting the SNP out. We need a government that is obsessed with public services, not nationalism. A government that wants to serve the people and not themselves. Scotland deserves... We deserve a government that listens, learns, and leads, a government that puts people before party, a government that treats public services not as political props, but as sacred trusts. The time for excuses is over. The time for change is now. It's time for real reform. Thank you.